Hello and welcome back to learning about techniques used in Islamic bookbinding. Today we're going to cut and glue the spine lining. This is the spine of the book. I've sewed it, I've glued it, and now I need to line it. The lining is an extra bit of protection. Really that's what everything is just added layers of protection to protect the content of your book when you're done. For me there is no content yet, but in medieval period, for the most part, the books would have been decorated first with whatever text and illuminations were going to be put in there. So for starters, the lining is generally made from linen. Most commonly it was undyed or white linen because they didn't want the dye from the linen to seep into the pages of the book after it was glued. In modern times, the dyes are much more color fast, so you can use anything you want. I use a fairly loose weave linen. You don't want super tight, you don't want super loose. For bookbinding, they sell this thing called super. It is very, very loose weave and won't work properly for what we're doing with it. So I cut out a strip of linen because I do a bunch of these books all at once. You can do however you want. What you need is a piece of linen that is the width of your spine plus approximately 2 fingers width on either side. And that's to help give it something it will grab onto the cover boards, and in the manuals that we have that exist from that time period, that's what it specifies. 2 fingers for me winds up about 1.25 inches, so somewhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches will work for most people. So for starters, I'm going to trim off this end over here with the selvage because I don't like it. Alright, it's really pretty simple. You need the height of the book plus a little bit, and the plus a little bit is to help hold the end-band core in place while you sew. So I'm doing, I don't know how you can see this, I'm doing just about a little under 1/8 inch on either side is the goal. And I find it easiest to just put the book on the fabric and cut. If you find it easier to measure and then cut, that's fine too. So, random scrap linen, spine lining. To glue it on, just take your glue and smear it on the spine. You want to be generous, but not like super overly enthusiastic about it. You also want to try and make sure that your glue is only on the spine, not down on the sides. I use wheat starch glue, so I apply it with my fingers. I use this stuff. But if you're using PVA or something else, feel free to use just a paintbrush. Paintbrush doesn't work super well for wheat starch glue in my experience. So you want to make sure that there's enough, especially make sure there's enough at the ends, because you really want it to stick well there while you're doing the end-band sewing. It's more annoying to do the end-band sewing if you have a loose spine lining there. So the glue is really just to hold it in place kind of while you finish making the book. Preferably it will last the entire lifetime of the book, but it doesn't really have to. That's why you sew it in the end-band sewing in the next step. So there you go. And then clean the glue off my fingers. And then you take your strip of linen and you center it best you can over the spine. I'm not a perfectionist, so I'm not going to worry about being perfect here. But I am going to make sure that I have covered the spine, so if needed, I will just sort of slide it over so that I'm slightly overlapping the spine on both sides. So you can do this while the glue is wet. Once it's dried, you're kind of stuck with whatever you've done. So I do a finger press first, and then I will locate my bone folder. Then I'll take my bone folder and I'll just press it in really good. I want there to be a very good contact between the linen and the glue and the spine. And then you just set it aside I will set it aside such that it is propped up or on its side, so that way when it glues down this way instead of up this way. Just in case there's a tiny bit of glue on the edges that will cause it to warp one direction or the other. I would rather it warp inward, as it were. And that's it. You set it aside to dry.